What's up, everybody? Welcome to the brand new era, the Shameless Era podcast. I'm Lynsey Justine.
I'm Justine Eno.
And we could not be more excited to be launching this brand newly branded podcast, the Shameless Era, to deepen the conversation about what it means to be an ambitious, shameless, entrepreneurial woman. And I could not be more excited for our first guest this morning. This woman is a mentor of mine, my spirit sister, my mastermind buddy. She's an author of 2 books, and she is a flow coach. She has Flow Your Business and Flow Your Life. And we're going to dive into an incredibly juicy, awesome conversation with the one and only Angela Ditch. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. I'm just thrilled to be here and happy for you guys with the launch of this new era.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's exciting. I know the first time I seen you speak, I instantly became a fan. I think it was like within the first 3 sentences of your presentation at the Shameless Ambition conference that I was like fell in love and was sitting in my chair, just like just so absorbed in everything you had to say. So we're so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was honestly a no-brainer when planning Shameless Ambition to bring you to the stage at that event, because I wanted to invite the audience into the kind of conversations that you and I have been having for years. And as an expert in flow, you have such a powerful message to share with the world. And it was hard for me to sit down and kind of come up with the questions for this podcast because there's so many
answers.
Well, I know all the answers, but there's just so many things that I would love to hear you talk about. And one of the biggest things that has always sat with me is your big decision that you made. I think it was in 2007 when you made the decision to walk away from a 6-figure career, a 26-year marriage, and just travel the world. And so I'd love to know, were you worried at that time about what people would think of your decision as you embarked on this totally brand new journey?
Actually, I wasn't.
Okay.
That was kind of the furthest thing from my mind. If anything, I was more thinking about my son because he was 15 at the time, and we were making the decision to pull him out of school and take him traveling and put him on online. So if I had any concern at that time, it was probably more, was I doing the right thing as a parent? Would be more what I would say. It was kind of a compulsion. It was just this, when you know it to the bones decision that it was time to let go of what was and start to walk in the unknown and discover what is, and what's possible. And so it was really truly led. I was truly led.
I think it comes full circle. Like, I mean, for your son or your children to watch you do that as an adult and really lean into that gut instinct and follow your intuition. I think we would all doubt it as a parent, right? Because you do, that's part of being a parent, but to see it come full circle for your son, I'm sure he learned so many life lessons from watching you be so brave.
Oh, absolutely. And he is that in himself. He's his own person, a sovereign being, and he makes his decisions based on what's best for him and his family. Yeah,
Beautiful.
for
So
sure.
would you describe that as one of the best decisions you ever made as a parent?
Oh, hands down,
Yeah.
hands down. Yes, absolutely. Best decisions.
Was it terrifying at the time? Like, was there a moment where you just had that moment of clarity and you knew that this was the decision you needed to make?
It was probably an accumulation of things. I was kind of at a point in my life where I was looking at the career I was on and the life that I had, and I could see that I was kind of going down the road where if I continued down that path, I probably would be looking at, too much stress, maybe health issues. And at the time, in truth, there were things going on in my relationship that were needing attention. And so really thought that letting go of the, existing life, cashing in, taking money out of the equation and making it just this free flowing adventure would maybe even save my relationship. But what it really did was it freed us up to be able to make that separation easier in the end. I would say that once the decision was made, it was just a big adventure that unfolded. And when I had a career, so I left the career in June, and we had an auction later that summer and sold everything on our farm. And then I went on a holiday to Sedona, Arizona. And while I was in Sedona, I had some of the most magical experiences that kind of cracked me wide open. And that really helped make everything easy because I could see things from a much different perspective than being caught in the loops of, day-to-day life.
So cool. Arizona has like a magnetic field, I swear, for like
Just suck
breaking people
in
open. Yeah.
vortex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
How did that feel coming back from that though? You went on this big adventure and you were cracked wide open and saw so many different parts of the world and met so many different people. But then coming back to your day-to-day life, your community, your family, what was that like for you to kind of, now you're this new person, but back in your kind of old stomping grounds?
Well, to start with, it was like walking back into old patterns. And so you'd find yourself reacting in the ways that you'd reacted before. And so I really needed to integrate and take ownership for the fact that I was evolving. And
Mhm.
so, it's like we get into relationship with people and we get into the habit of scripts. I'll play this role, you play that role, and
Right.
somebody changes the lines on their script and it rattles everybody else because they don't know what to expect. I'm fortunate that I come from a family who is fairly forward thinking. And so my siblings were more curious than they were concerned. And so it just really grew into being able to be comfortable in my own skin, no matter where I am.
mm,
Well, and I think that translated into your books, I'm sure. Even just you read the jacket of your books and it's just they're juicy and saucy and filled with just energy and passion that not every just regular person kind of has. And so do you feel like you found a quality of shamelessness on this journey of yours as you built out your yogic practice and you practice new modalities, and how did that kind of translate into this new version of you?
Oh man, that's a big question.
mm,
I would say truly, I was really born with like a hyperactive nervous system. So I've always been kind of hyper vigilant in my life. And I think that I kind of learned how to micromanage my surroundings as a young adult to try to make my environment safe. So when I made the choice to leave everything and start walking into a world I'd never been before, it was the first time I really got the experience of walking in the unknown. And when you're hypervigilant, the unknown is terrifying.
Right.
But again, there was like this something in me was just guiding me one step in front of the other. And so I would say that, I unfolded in ways that and evolved in ways that I could never have imagined I ever would have done. Like if you said this is going to be you today, Angela, 15, 20 years ago, I would have laughed at you.
Right.
It's such a huge contrast of evolution. And, I think I'm forgetting the question you asked me.
How does, speaking of shamelessness, the I can imagine there was a huge adoption of this quality in your life as you broke away from the molds that you had grown up to know, and that would require a sense of shameless ambition, of shameless emotion to be able to crack that wide open. And so do you feel like you've adopted more of a shameless quality going through this whole journey?
I would agree with that. When I think of shame and I think of all the yogic practices and the different things that we did, what you're really doing is you're learning to be present with yourself. And, shame is this kind of self-judgment that you've done something wrong or, you're bad. It's like on the map of consciousness that David Hawkins uses, for example, shame is at the bottom. It's the lowest vibration frequency. But shame is also a wonderful tool because when you feel shame, it's a way to check in and say, hey, am I really in alignment with what I believe to be right action? The problem I think that we have in our current world is that, we're outsourcing our self-esteem to the public.
Okay.
And so now shame is often coming from the judgments of others. And so we're very much affected by that external world. So, first you have to know, where's the shame coming from? Am I feeling shamed because I'm being unaccepted or judged by the public? Or is this really something that is within me? And when you think of shame being kind of the lowest on the vibrational scale, you could almost say it sits, right at the trap door to the subconscious. So I think in order to be shameless, you have to know shame,
Right.
because they're two ends of the same stick. And I think people get confused when they think of shamelessness. They think a person doesn't have that conscience, that measurement inside about what's right or wrong, that they
Mhm.
just act however they want. But to be truly shameless, you have to be willing to see your shame. And so absolutely, I learned that, my true job in life is to be the best, most authentic, most real version of myself, the best that I can in every moment, because, we all have our masks and we all have our conditioning, right? And I think, writing the two books, and particularly the second one, was an exercise in absolute shamelessness,
Right.
you know.
How did that feel? That must have felt
That's so freeing.
incredible.
Yeah.
It did. It really did.
Yeah, I tie a lot of I mean, I've taken my yoga training as well. So when I think of shame, I think of the opposite of would be like authenticity. I think the more we can be authentic with ourselves and fall in love with ourselves and our truest selves, the less shame we feel internally. Anyway, but my question to you is, what part of your journey, like when did it really click for you? Because I had a click moment too, of just being like, this is my space, this is where I'm meant to be. I may have not realized it for how many years, but this is my home.
Oh gosh, well, actually probably would be back in 2007 when I landed in Sedona, and I met one of my now good friends, Joan Kidd, and I sat down to do a session with her, and she asked me, she said, "Angela, how's your marriage?" And I said, "Well, it's okay. It's got its ups and downs." And she said, "Okay, well, first thing we're going to do is get you to stop lying to yourself."
Ooh.
And that level of truth just pierced through me in a way that made me feel so comfortable and safe. I mean, I cried. Obviously, it was a pretty emotional moment for me, but it was like I'm with somebody who's so real that they're not going to, just fluff me up and tell me all these wonderful things, that you can hear in those kinds of sessions,
Mhm.
but really getting down to the truth. And I needed to be in environments where truth was safe.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that would be it.
Yeah, I feel like in so many areas in the world, right? You try to be truthful and show your truest self, and it gets shut down. And
Mhm.
it takes those safe spaces that you facilitate now in your current practice. But it takes those safe spaces for people to be able to really like lean into their authenticity and know that it's okay. So
Yeah.
thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
And what a nod to having a community of women. That girlfriend of yours made you feel incredibly safe to be authentic and honest with yourself and with her in the moment. And you were able to have this breakthrough moment that radically changed your life. And
Mhm.
imagine what the world would be like for women if we felt safe in more situations to have those kinds of breakthroughs. And you and I talk lots about this, and that's why we're such amazing friends, is because we create that space for each other. But so many women out there are struggling. They are in that stage of struggle. And this is kind of the perfect lead up into flow, is that when we're in struggle, it's really hard to see how we can get out of that. And so what do you say to women when you can identify that they're in that struggle, and if they can identify how to get into flow, the difference that it would make?
Well, at first I would say is have immense compassion for yourself, because you're doing the best job that you know how in that moment. Because really, we always are, depending on what program's been triggered and how much awareness we have in it. And so I think compassion and creating a safe space for them to just be where they are is super important. And then the next thing would be the practice of observation. To be able to go for a ride along in your loops with your mind, with your breath, with your body, with your mood, and just really get to know what it is that's actually happening without that judgment. I think you raised a really good point earlier, is surrounding yourself with people that you can feel safe with. And I think that a lot of us don't have that. A lot of people don't have those people,
I
or they
think
think they have to have it all figured out before they show up.
I think that so many of us have been like shut down when
Mhm.
we've went to go to someone that we thought would be safe, or you know, maybe a girlfriend or whatever, and tried to do that, and then you kind of get shut down, and then that shame comes in, right? Of, oh no, like maybe I shouldn't be feeling this way or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's so important to find those safe people.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
that feeling of feeling judged is immediately embarrassing. You know, it doesn't feel nice. And you know, in putting yourself out there the way that you have over the years, Angela, you've been so raw and so vulnerable with your audience, whether it's through your books or through the podcast or just using your voice. And how do you work through those feelings of, well, what are other people going to think, of worrying about judgment or backlash, or like those are heavy feelings, but how do you work through
You know, sometimes successfully and sometimes not, is the truth. I think we all get caught up in wanting to belong and wanting to be loved and appreciated and valued. And I think that ultimately for me, when I don't feel that way or I feel afraid of the public or people in general, it's because I'm really touching those parts of myself that feel insecure. So
Right.
I always kind of start with the mirror and look back and say, okay, well, what's really going on? And, you know, again, this takes you into a struggle phase. So it's a great time to ask yourself, tell me more, like unpack the whole story so I can hear it from the inside out. And then, you know, just recognize it for what it is. And it just is that. It's insecurity. It's the wanting to belong. It's the wanting to be connected. Maybe you're going to make different choices about who you're hanging out with or who you're sharing that vulnerability with. Not everybody deserves that from you, right? But to come out publicly, like for example, my second book is very raw. My first book is raw, but my second book is very raw because it's got the sexuality nature to it. And I felt so clear and empowered by bringing that book out because I knew that the energy in that book was one that made it all okay.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there will be people that would come across that book that would have all kinds of reactions to it that would be judgmental. But I think the more we are, are the more we get into our own alignment and are able to show up authentically or show up, you know, shameless, the more it gives other people permission to do so. When we get those people out there that are, you know, sitting in the gallery just doing the judgmental stuff, it's because they're not dealing with the mirror part for themselves. They're triggered inside and they're just projecting out. So it's trying to have compassion for that. And at the same time, compassion for self, because it's hard when somebody comes at you.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so tough. I would
It
say
is.
to my daughter,
Been
I'm
there.
like, you need to treat yourself like you would treat your best friend, right? And I mean, it's practice we preach and we all need to keep doing it. It's a practice every day, but
Mhm.
to treat ourselves with such compassion that we would with our best friend, you know?
Yeah.
Um, my question with you, when you look in the mirror and you do that reflection, when you're feeling those insecurities or those judgments, how far back do you think it is important to go? So, like, how deep do you want to find the root of that cause? Is it something that you just look at in like your current life, or do you dive back into like adolescence and inner child, and like how far are we looking back in the mirror?
You know, I really think it depends on what that thing wants to show me.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think sometimes it doesn't have to be that deep, and sometimes it takes longer and you start to notice those memories. I've learned in my own meandering exploration that focusing back can be a trap. So focusing too much on the problem can get you looped into, you know, recreating or being in that energy. So it's kind of a balance between looking at what's real that's coming up and then asking yourself the question, what's a better possibility, or how do I transform this? And that's, you know, in flow, that's how you move out of struggle into flow, is through that release point where you've listened without judgment to everything that wants to come up till it loops once, maybe twice, and then, you know, shifting forward and anticipating that there's a solution or a way through it.
And do
Yeah.
you feel like after you've practiced flow for quite a while now, do you still catch yourself in the old loops? and have
Oh yeah.
reloop. Yeah. I'm like, I think, yeah, it's a forever practice, right? Like we are
It
so
is.
conditioned to stay in those scary loops that it's sometimes hard to go into the fun ones. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, we're in different time frames, different eras. There's different things happening right now. There's so much opportunity to be triggered by fear in the world, just in general, for lots of years. That's one way to keep people in struggle. We can get really caught in that fear, and nobody's immune to that.
no, no,
No.
not at all. I mean, we talked about during COVID how your practice switched more to online and you just dove right into that and you really quite enjoy it. But speaking of fear, it was like those kind of situations, right? It's just it feeds and feeds and feeds. And once you're in that fear, it's quite hard to get out sometimes for sure.
Hmm. Hmm. I
But
also,
oh,
oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
going to your online practice. So this surprised me because we talked about this briefly at the conference. And you asked me how I like teaching online, and I was like, I don't like it. And you're like, I love it. So can you tell me like a little bit more about all of your online practices and kind of because I know you have so many avenues of how you can help and assist people.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I have a morning practice I run Monday through Thursday, and it's basically a combination of movement, meditation, breath work, and focus. And it's to open up the energy in the spine and really get things flowing in the body and bring your consciousness and your form dovetailed together. So I love that practice. It's an hour long, and people can join either live or by recording. And then I do coaching. So I do one-to-one and I do group coaching both for Flow Your Life and for Flow Your Business. And I love all of it.
And you love equally the business and the personal, like you love the switch back and forth.
I
Yeah.
do. Flow as a concept for a person is a way to, evolve from one state to another. You can, pick a goal and flow will take you to the result. You can pick a problem or a struggle and flow will alleviate that for you and find a solution. And it's really, if I were to say anything about flow, it would be that flow is the most important strategy. It's the most important strategy of all time. If we could get everybody to learn the basics of flow, people would be more creative, more productive, more innovative, happier, feel more self-reliant. They would, evolve. It would be just a wonderful contribution to the world. When you look at business, business is just group flow. It's a
Mm.
whole bunch of components and people and things flowing to the same end. So it's bringing all of that together. I love Flow Your Business. It's so fun.
Just
Right?
all
It's so
the
fun.
people flowing together. Yeah.
Oh, I'm lucky and spoiled that you're my mastermind buddy and we get to
Right
hang
back
out
at
every
you.
couple of weeks, girlfriend, because honestly, like we'll text each other and, celebrate our wins together and work through our struggles. We've definitely had some of those times where we had to have those honest conversations with each other, but there's no greater feeling than when I can identify the fact that I am in flow. And it feels incredible because everything in my life just seems to be working out in certain ways and not always perfect. I don't feel like when you're in flow, life is perfect, but it just feels like happiness. I don't really know how else to describe it. Like, how do you feel when you know you're in flow?
Well, immediately you're selfless and you're timeless. You forget about anything about the body or time can dilate. It can be really fast or really slow, but it also shifts your brain chemistry. So the inhibitions disappear. You're not self-conscious, you're not doubting, you're just plugged into the moment. And if you were to think of it like a laptop and the internet, it's the laptop logging onto the internet, and now the finite amount of information and experience you have here is now plugged into the infinite amount of information that you can access because you've cracked open. And so it's just the most empowering, fun, joyful, productive, lots of ahas and revelations. It's wonderful.
Curious, do you think that there's a case to be made for sometimes flow could be confused with like being manic? And here's why I asked this question, because when I was in the depths of the Shameless Ambition conference last year, I really felt every day like I was in flow, but I look back now and realize that I was kind of manic and I was really just in survival mode. But I think I confused flow with productivity. And I wasn't acknowledging the stresses and feelings that I was actually having during that time. So like, how would you distinguish like healthy flow from mania, essentially?
Well, I think that it always has that component in it
Okay.
because flow is very addictive. You
Yeah.
know, it's the neurochemicals in flow are like oxytocin, you know, anandamide. These are all beautiful bliss chemicals, serotonin. There's all kinds of wonderful neurochemicals, and it feels great to be in flow. So it's easy to become a flow junkie. I know I sure was. I went through that phase where I couldn't find a new cliff to jump off of and discover and learn something fast enough. It was just addictive. But I think, you know, flow is a cycle, it's a wave, and it always begins with struggle. There's always a focus, either a goal or challenge or a problem. And then when you break free of that and you head into flow states and you become you let go of that limited self perspective and open up to discover and learn and be curious and, you know, see the synchronicities, all that stuff and that wonderfulness, you need to come down into integration. And I would say in what you described in that experience is you weren't able to integrate. You didn't have time to slow down. There was probably a part of you that didn't want to slow down because you figured the stress might get you. It
Probably, yeah.
might swamp of you. And
Yeah.
so I would say you did what you needed to do. Your system, you know, performed beautifully for you in that experience to continuously flow you through. The struggles in the background were just bigger waves pushing you forward.
Right.
When it ended, you probably had a large integration phase.
It was like a tsunami, girlfriend.
Like
Yeah.
that was the best visual that
Yeah.
I could have for your experience.
Mega crash.
Do you find that now that you experience flow, you know flow, that the struggle part is a little less daunting? Knowing
Mostly,
flow is gonna follow.
yeah, I would absolutely say that I can look at struggle most of the time with, you know, a good sense of excitement. Like, okay, here's an opportunity to solve a problem until you get so trapped in the loop and you get down into those lower levels of, you know, like the shame, the guilt, the fear, and you get caught in those. Then it's just more reminding yourself this is going to pass and I must be still unpacking what I need to know about this in order to make this shift forward and you know, grace with self. But yeah, I would say once you once you really understand the mechanics of flow and the flow cycle, then you don't look at struggle the same at all. And you know, there's a lot of people out there that
You'll
don't know. There's a
sorry.
lot of people that don't know that there's anything beyond struggle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they just get stuck down there and they just can't see the way
Well,
out.
and I feel like if you don't know a way out and you've never experienced it, it's just so easy to loop and loop and loop in that struggle, right? Like you had just said a little while ago. It's easy to stay in that cycle. Once you're in it,
Mhm.
it's the hardest to get out. So
I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more on Flow Your Business. And I've been fortunate enough to hear about this from inception, and just how you can relate this to a company and a strategy, creating a strategic plan. And some people might not understand how flow could be considered a strategic plan. So can you take us into a little bit of what that would look like from a business perspective?
Sure. I mean, first I would ask people to envision a wave. You know, a wave has, you know, the wave moving up, it's got the top, it comes down, and then it's got the trough. And so, you know, that's life. Life has ups and downs. This is the movement of everything. And so, you know, again, as we were speaking before, struggle is that piece before the peak, and then you have your release at the top, you're flowing down the downslope, and then you integrate at the bottom. And so because this is the path of everything, you can plot your client's journey from their problem to their desired solution.
Mhm.
You can plot the operations of your business from the time that the client is first met with to the point where you've delivered all the services. Everything about your business from marketing to operations, to your product services, to your team needs, your team training, your financials, everything fits on this diagram. And when you plot it all together, you easily see where it doesn't align. And then it's effortless to make the tweaks. And once you get this model going, then you realize that it becomes a management strategy. Because no matter what's going on, you just flow it. You plot it onto the wave, you figure out how it's functioning and where you need to step in and how you can make those shifts. And so what I found, and been so fortunate to have some wonderful clients, what I found is I hear things like, I've spent thousands on business coaching and I got more out of the first hour and a half with you.
Awesome.
Because they can see it visually. Or they'll, it just really pulls together what they truly want. There's major revelations come in for business owners that maybe they really change their whole business strategy because it's not actually matching them.
Right.
But a little tweak here or there, and it does. So it's really fun to do that.
I think it's great getting vulnerable in the workplace.
That's right. Yeah.
Love it.
And from a business perspective, how long do you work with somebody typically? Is it on an as needed basis, or just kind of, is there a sort of a set amount of time that would make the big overall difference?
Well, ultimately, I think we're looking at about 8 or 9 areas of focus.
Right.
And so I typically work in like an immersive session. So our sessions are usually about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, so we can really get some work accomplished. But each business is different and each business's focus is different. So I always start with just a 2.5 hour initial strategy session, and we'll look at what is their priority and we'll flow that first. Once they see that and we flesh things out a little bit, it's easier for me to create a quote that's more individualized for how much time that a person would want to spend.
Right. That makes sense. I can't imagine there being just a one size fits all strategy in that sphere. Well, in any of your spheres, to be honest, like everybody has such different needs. And even on the individual side of flow your life, like that's got to be such a deep personal journey with somebody. How do you hold space for people and walk them through such large transformations in their life? Like that's a big thing for a person to do.
It is a real privilege when someone feels safe enough to share themselves with you. And so I think more than anything, I feel so honored that I get the opportunity to be a safe space for someone. I appreciate that myself, to be held in safe space. And so it's really about listening. It's listening and letting them unpack what they need to, making a few suggestions here and there to help them get aligned with a very basic strategy, which is flow. And what I love is that when people get the wave, it just clicks. And immediately there's self-compassion. And to witness that in someone is just such an honor.
Beautiful.
We've talked a lot about conserving our energy, or deciding where our energy goes and kind of protecting our energy. And so you exude such a beautiful energy and such a healing, welcoming, safe energy. Just even to meet you, I'm sure people listening right now, just hearing your voice, are feeling safe and comforted. How do you do that? How do you decide where your energy flows, or how to protect your energy, or just how to refill your cup when you need it?
Well, I actually don't really subscribe to the concept of protection.
Okay.
I would say more boundary. I come from a line of thinking where, there's one unified field of space and we're all in it. And so I don't, there really is no separation between us. And so, it's a good friend of mine uses the analogy, if somebody pees in the pool over here and swims really hard to the other side, do you think they're not in it? Okay. And so I think if anything, it's building your energy from the inside out and making sure to take that time to retreat or step back and reestablish that connection on a regular basis, whether that's daily or 5 times a day or however much you need. I also believe that we sort of attract in what we're putting out. So everything is always curious to me. Okay, Why is that happening? What in my energy is wanting to bring this forward? What am I learning? And so, yeah, I would say it's not about protection so much as it is being clear in myself.
I would love for you to elaborate on our conversation that we have often on obligation and how that shows up in our lives, because I know that I certainly struggle with feelings of obligation, and then I find myself in scenarios that I don't necessarily want to be in and I can accept them. But how does a person sort of establish those boundaries with that feeling of obligation?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, to me, obligation is like a tangled web because it's always opposing, programs kind of tangled up together. So, like, let's say obligation is really common in family, for example, right? So, on the one hand, you have this, deep belief in wanting to be connected and love your family and spend time with them, but there's also maybe an overlay of expectation on that,
Mhm.
right? And maybe that's not really fitting what your life is. So you have this entanglement. I think when you realize you're in obligation, the best step is to just step back and forget all of that
Right.
and say, what would I do if I was operating outside of all of that? And then make the choice. And so when you make the choice, you literally pull your power and energy back from that tangled web and reestablish it in your own self and say, now, how do I want to show up? What do I want to do in this?
I think that's such a powerful realization for women to have, that they can reframe those obligations in life and how they feel about them, how they show up for them. Um, we also talk lots about conditioning, and I feel like a lot of women aren't necessarily aware that they have the choice to change their conditioning and to break some of those cycles that they're just used to, right?
Mhm.
And when you think about conditioning and the way that we were raised and changing those cycles, what advice would you give to a woman who has identified their struggle? They have identified that a change needs to happen, but they're not necessarily sure how to make it. They're scared because that's all they know.
Well, again, that's a very individual approach depending on what it is that they're dealing with. But you made the comment that they're scared.
Mhm.
I would look at that first.
Okay.
And one of the exercises I love to do, in fact, I just did a few days ago for myself, is to just write out your fear. Like, what's your fear in the outer world?
Right.
What's your fear inside? And what fears have you been afraid to give words to? And to get them all out on paper, because when you take them out of here and put them on paper, now it's like you can look at them objectively. It's actually the act of stepping back and witnessing. And then you can put them in context, because I think a lot of times we think we have to kill our fears. We have to get rid of them. We have to eliminate them. And some of them do go away. But for the most part, we all cruise around with our fear. We
Mhm.
just bring it with us anyway. And so I would say to that person, if you understand your struggle and you know what you don't want and you're a little bit afraid to make changes on what you do want, then I would look at the fear and then I would really define who do you want to be and how do you want to show up? And then get them to practice showing up like that. It's really empowering when there's, say, you have an obligation or you feel a sense of obligation, you're squirming in it. You
Mhm.
step back and then you make the decision for yourself. If you choose to still, step into what would have been the obligation, but not from the place of obligation, it changes everything in the experience.
That makes perfect sense.
Your choice instead of an obligation,
That's
like
right.
someone else's choice is essentially.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And really this year is meant to be a year of studying personal power,
Ooh, talk about
right?
that, please.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
The 8 year in numerology. And so the questions coming up was, where is your power? Who has it? And what's happening with it? Can you, first and foremost, can you reel it back in? And then can you make a conscious choice where you want to send it? I think, the only thing we really have control over is our focus,
Right.
right? And so if we can learn to, you know, get into the present moment, so a specific time, in our bodies, a specific place, with a present focus on, how do I want to show up? It's a game changer for everything.
Well, it's like, I love that saying, energy flows where your attention goes. And I feel like that's so true, that even though you might not be feeling energetically charged on something, if you focus on it, you can drive that energy there. And I know you did a whole podcast episode on what it means for this year to be an 8-year, but could you just give us like a quick 60-second high level overview of what that means? Because I'm so intrigued by what these numerical years mean. And I feel like there's such a positive outlook for this year.
Yeah. Well, 8 is really a year of personal power. So it's an opportunity to really reclaim again your personal power and choose where you want to direct it. Because it's emphasizing on power, then your ability to create is amplified.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a year where we're going to see the abuse of power. We're going to see where power is used well and where it is not used well. So it really helps us to get into a place of deciding, what do we believe is right and true. So there's a bit of that definition going on there as well. And because it's being exposed, it offers us the opportunity as a society to make shifts and changes based on that, right? The 8 years is also about breath.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kundalini numerology, it's the pranic body, the breath body. And so focusing on your breathing, that will, bring up things around grief, around sadness, around loss. So how much power are we giving to our struggles, to our old patterns, to our obligations, to our worries, to our fears? Breath is really a wonderful place to make that connection between, your consciousness and your reality, and start to be more embodied and present in every moment. So it's an exciting year.
It's so exciting. I just feel more present and authentic just thinking about it, to be honest.
And just to throw that, it's the Radical Flow podcast, right? If you
Yes.
want to hear more
Yes.
about it, or there's tons of episodes that are juicy and great. So
That's right.
that's your podcast that you can find. Where can you find your podcast?
It's on iTunes and Spotify and Google and on my Kajabi site.
All the places.
All the
Yeah.
places.
All the places. Yeah.
Awesome. I just wanted to throw that out there while we were talking about it, in
Absolutely.
case someone wanted more information, because I'm going
Thank
to
you.
that 8-year thing.
It's honestly, I think the first time I listened to the podcast about the numerical year was right before I rolled into Shameless Ambition. I was laying in a hotel room in Jasper. It was New Year's Day. I was stressed out and feeling crazy, and I listened to Angela's beautiful voice and just felt inspired, and I felt supported by the universe. And whether or not people subscribe to those kind of things, I think that there's just a message there for how they can take charge of their own reality, and how they can use their time as an asset and a resource. So
yeah. Well, and again, that podcast you're talking about would have been the one where I tracked it all the way back to a 4-year.
yes, yeah,
Right. And 4 was really getting, in control of your neutral mind, being able to be the witness. 5 was strengthening your physical body and your ability to show up as the teacher. 6 was that one-pointed focus. And 7 was your energy.
right.
And now 8 is power. 9 will be, what are you going to do with that power? What's your mastery going to be?
Oh man, I just feel so badass just thinking about it. It's all very exciting. I want to touch quickly on how you've grown in your journey. I know that there was a time where people didn't necessarily understand you and the language that you were using and how you were trying to describe this energy and this flow. And so how do you feel like you've taken it from a space of woo-woo to something
hokey.
yeah, and we talk about this
Yeah.
lots. And
Yeah.
how have you taken it from that woo-woo space to flow your business is a peak performance strategy that you need to know? Like that's a big transition, and I feel like you explain this so eloquently and so well, and at such a high intellectual level that it just obliterates the woo-woo. So talk a little bit about that journey.
I will. I want to share something that a good friend, Dave Doyle, said once. He said, it's ridiculously practical to be a little bit woo.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
again, when I stepped out on away from the business world and into this walkabout, I was, just following my feet wherever they took me. So it was a journey with no real plan. It was really led, is the best way I can put it. And so, of course, I really walked into the connection with one's own spirit.
Mhm.
And so, again, you could call that the woo side. But I'm also really grounded. I'm a Taurus. I like proof, I like science. And so I always married it with that. What I realized after walking about for a long time is that everything that I was learning was flow. It's
Mhm.
just I didn't have the word for it. And flow, is not my concept. It's a concept developed by a man by the name Mihail Csikszentmihalyi. I'm always proud of myself when I can say that.
Nice
And
work.
he's since passed, but he's known as the father of flow. So he made the definition when he was studying people entering into those creative muses like artists and writers and those kinds of things. And so I would say that, you know, I don't know why, but I'm losing your question.
How do you take it from woo-woo to peak performance strategies for
Thank you.
business?
Thank you. I think I came to a place where I really just dovetailed and married both sides of myself.
Mhm.
That deep business. I love business. I've managed businesses of all kinds of sizes into the 8 figures. I've owned businesses. I've married the two sides. I see how well they fit together. And so it's really fun to bring this back into a more relatable and tangible space.
I think the workplace can get so tough and hard and cold
Mhm.
lots of time, especially when you start bringing in money and financials and projections and all those icky things. So to be able to bring flow in also, in my opinion, brings in vulnerability, right? And asking people to show up as their authentic selves, which then in turn breeds creativity
Mhm.
and that openness and flow essentially. So I think that's absolutely beautiful, and kudos to those business owners who are willing to step in the woohoo to make their business better, because I'm all for the woohoo. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm just so excited for what you're bringing to the world and the new conversations that you're sparking and igniting, and the new perspective that you are offering to your clients, both individually and in business. They definitely are a thought leader pattern that you're putting out there. And I think that it's going to be a powerful year to see what happens in your business and flow your life. I know that you have a few things that you're working on launching over the next little bit, but as of today's recording, how can people work with you? Where can they find you? Where would you like to direct them if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, I will direct them to peakflowstrategy.com. As of the day of this recording, that's part of a rebrand coming from flowtribe.ca. So it'll just forward you there.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to jump on a call with me. We'll see what it is that's really right for you. Again, we have practices, we have group and private coaching. And so there's all kinds of ways to engage.
Awesome. Peakflowstrategy.com. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just such an honor to even know you, to be able to sit in a space with you.
Sure.
So to be able to work with you, I mean, I can't push that enough for anyone who's wanting to learn more.
Well, it's just this 1 hour conversation is going to sit with me now for the rest of today while I just plot my, powerful 8 year world domination over here. And it's Angela, it's the sound of your voice, it's
It
the
is.
things that you say, it's the concepts that you share, it's the space that you share with anybody who's in your presence, specifically women. And we're just so grateful that you agreed to be our first guest on the Shameless Era. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing your shameless ambition with us.
Thanks for helping us be brave.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really honored and grateful to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we usually, as you know, I know you have listened to our podcast before, but Lynn's told you as well, we usually end our podcast with a quote. So do you have one that you would like to share with us and our
I
listeners?
I do. This is one of my favorite quotes. It comes from a man by the name of Hillel the Elder, who was a Jewish spiritual leader back in, I think he passed away around the year 10. And it goes like this: If not you, then who? If not now, then when? And I love that quote because it really brings us back to the moment and back to self-responsibility. And it's really our job to have the best life we can possibly have. And so why not?
Just do it now.
Why
Yeah.
not me? And why not now?
Yeah.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
love that.
I love how just really short that is too, though, just to have that in your mind of
Mhm.
like when you go into those moments of self-doubt of being like, oh no, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll start in a month, and of just to be like now.
Well, and it's like even starting this podcast back in September, everybody was like, oh, how much time did you need to get set? Like we just started it. We literally just hit record because it was, well, if not us, who? If not now, when? And now here we are 8 months later and have this brand new era that we get to share with the world had we not just hit record back then. So I think that's a perfect quote to leave the audience with. And I truly hope that every listener out there checks out the website, peakflowstrategy.com, and listens to the podcast, The Radical Flow, because there's just so many good, juicy conversations on there to share. So,
and your voice is just like angelic, I would say. Like, and there's certain people you'll find in like the spiritual, yogic, meditation, flow community that just have this aura, this voice, this presence that you're like,
I just want to bottle it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
100%. Yeah, you could sell that for a fortune. But thank you so much for taking the chance and taking the time with us today.
Is there anything else
Thank
you'd
you.
like to share with the listeners, Angela?
No, just I'm really, really inspired by you guys. I love to listen to your podcast when I'm on the treadmill, and I'm so happy that you are doing it.
Oh, well,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Your support means the world to us. We appreciate your time and space and sending you all our love for this epic 8 year.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.